When you hear the word cowboy, something inside you stirs. Maybe the echo of hoofbeats across an empty plain, or the creak of a worn saddle as a lone rider moves beneath a burning sky. For more than a century, storytellers have shaped this image. The brave wanderer, the stoic hero, the man who walks with danger as calmly as he walks with his shadow. And yet the real story of the cowboy, the flesh and blood human beneath the myth, is richer, harsher, and more awe-inspiring than any Hollywood script. Today, we ride back into that world. We'll meet the real cowboys, walk the trails they carved into the continent, revisit the events that defined them, and wander into the ghostly legends that flickered beside campfires under western stars. Origins. Long before American cowboys galloped onto cinema screens, another group shaped the craft. South of the modern U.S. border, Mexican vaqueros, masters of horse and cattle, were already living a life that would become the blueprint for cowboy culture. They developed almost every iconic tool later associated with American cowboys. The lasso, la reata, thrown with the grace of a dancer's movement. The saddle with a horn strong enough to stop a 1,000-pound animal. Chaps to protect legs from thorny brush. Spurs, not for cruelty, but for communication with the horse. When settlers pushed westward after the Civil War, they didn't invent cowboying, they inherited it. And the frontier was never a place of one culture or one color. Cowboys were Mexican, Black, Native American, white, and immigrant sons of Europe, all riding under the same endless sky. Some historians say 1 in 4 cowboys was African American, men who traded the chains of slavery for the freedom and exhaustion of the open range. The Golden Age, 1865 to 1890. The era that forged the cowboys' legend lasted scarcely 25 years. After the Civil War, America's eastern cities were growing fast, hungry for beef. Texas, meanwhile, held millions of longhorn cattle wandering wild and nearly worthless on the open range. A steer worth $4 in Texas might bring 40 in Kansas. All that stood between the cattle and profit was 1,000 miles of harsh, unpredictable wilderness. And so began the great cattle drives. Imagine a river of horns and hooves, 2,000 longhorns pushing north, dust rising like smoke, cowboys positioned like guardians around the herd. The Chisholm Trail, the Goodnight Loving Trail, the Western Trail, these were arteries of a new economic heart. A trail boss rode at the point, eyes sharp as a hawk's. Behind him, a handful of riders kept the herd steady, singing low to calm the animals during tense nights. The songs were slow, rolling, almost hypnotic. Half prayer, half lullaby. Because one loud noise could start a stampede, a thunderous tide of muscle and fear capable of crushing horses and men alike. Days began before dawn. A cowboy would pull himself awake to the smell of coffee drifting from the chuck wagon. Breakfast was simple. Biscuits, beans, maybe bacon if luck allowed, but there was little time to linger. Hours in the saddle followed. Rain cut like knives. Heat baked skin into leather. Storms turned the plains into churning chaos. Night didn't bring rest. It brought night guard. Slow circles around the sleeping herd, watching for movement, wolves, rustlers, or storms shimmering on the horizon. The towns. When they reached towns like Abilene, Dodge City, or Wichita, the sense of arrival was electric. Saloons blazed with lamplight and music, poker tables rang with coins, and cowboys, paid at last, celebrated with all the fire they'd suppressed for months. It wasn't glamour, it was release. By the 1890s, railroads stretched deeper into Texas, and barbed wire fenced off once open lands. The era of the great drives ended, but their spirit carved itself into American memory. Iconic events and figures. Cowboy history is stitched together with tales of courage, conflict, and wild characters whose lives bordered on folklore. The Dalton gang, bold as iron, attempted the impossible, robbing 2 banks at once in Coffeyville. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid led the Wild Bunch across state lines, cracking safes with precision and charm. Jesse James, the ex-guerrilla fighter, became both a criminal and a folk hero, depending on who told the story. The Rufus Buck Gang, a rare interracial gang, left a trail of violence across the Indian Territory. The Pioneers. Not all icons were outlaws. Nat Love, better known as Deadwood Dick, chronicled his own life with the confidence of a man who knew he'd lived history. Bill Pickett, small in stature but fierce in talent, invented bulldogging, leaping from a horse to wrestle a steer with his bare hands. Bose Icard, Charles Goodnight's right-hand rider, was so trusted that Goodnight carved his admiration into Icard's tombstone. The conflicts. The Johnson County War pitted ruthless cattle barons against small ranchers and homesteaders in a battle for land. The Lincoln County War ignited the legend of Billy the Kid. The endless range wars, fences slashed at night, gunshots echoing across moonlit valleys, shaped the frontier more than any showdown at high noon. These weren't stories written for screens or novels. They were real lives. Sometimes violent, sometimes heroic, always unforgettable. A day in the life. The Cowboys' world wasn't built on glory but on grit. On the trail, 12 to 16 hours on horseback. A steady eye on cattle constantly looking for panic. Quick meals eaten by firelight, sleep beneath the stars, saddle for a pillow, coyotes calling in the distance. On the ranch, mending miles of fence beneath blistering sun, breaking mustangs wild as thunderstorms, driving strays out of canyons, nursing calves through winter's bite. The pay was modest, the work relentless. Yet many cowboys felt a freedom no city could offer, the kind that rides with the wind and sleeps with the sky. Guns, law, and myth. Hollywood painted cowboys as duelists, men whose lives were measured in bullets. But the true relationship between cowboys and guns was far simpler and far less glamorous. Tools, not trophies. A cowboy carried a revolver or rifle the way a carpenter carried a hammer. Weapons were for predators stalking the herd, rustlers testing the night, or the occasional dispute far from lawmen. Most preferred rifles. They were more accurate, more reliable, and better for long distances. The frontier had laws. Contrary to myth, Western towns weren't chaotic war zones. Dodge City required visitors to check their guns at the marshal's office. Tombstone also had strict weapon ordinances, which ironically led to the gunfight at the OK Corral when the law tried to enforce them. Sheriffs, marshals, judges, and even newspapers helped maintain order. Sure, violence happened, but shootouts in the street were far rarer than films suggest. The birth of the myth. So why do we imagine cowboys as gunslingers? Because stories sell. Dime novels exaggerated everything. Newspapers embellished reality. Hollywood perfected the silhouette. Hat low, pistol drawn, sun overhead. And audiences loved it. Still do. If cowboys had simply lived and died on the plains, their legend might have faded. But popular culture resurrected them again and again, turning them into immortal icons. Buffalo Bill's Wild West show carried cowboys across America and Europe, roping, riding, reenacting battles beneath striped tents while crowds cheered. The Western became one of cinema's greatest pillars. Stagecoach, The Searchers, High Noon, The Magnificent Seven, Once Upon a Time in the West, Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, and the Dollars trilogy. These films didn't just tell stories, they sculpted the cowboy's soul. In modern film and TV, the cowboy returned with a new face. Tombstone, Dances with Wolves, No Country for Old Men, 3:10 to Yuma remake, Yellowstone, 1883 and 1923, which revived frontier drama for a new generation. And then gaming brought the frontier roaring back.
You're a dead man! I'm sending you straight to hell!
Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2.
I had a goddamn plan!
Arguably the most vivid cowboy worlds ever created, capturing both the brutality and poetry of the dying Wild West. Call of Juarez, Gunslinger, a stylish retelling of outlaw myths. Gun, Desperados, West of Loathing, each offering its own flavor of the frontier. In pixels, film frames, and music, the cowboy rides forever. Paranormal and mystical tall tales. Cowboy nights were long, dark, and lonely. Perfect conditions for stories that blurred the line between fear and imagination. The Ghost Riders. Men spoke of spectral horsemen racing along ridgelines, their forms flickering like lantern light. Souls of cowboys lost in storms or stampedes. Skinwalkers. Near Navajo lands, riders whispered of figures that changed shape beneath the moon, half human, half beast, watching from the shadows. Some swore that in heavy fog, they heard ghostly cattle thundering unseen, an omen of an approaching disaster. Riders in the sky. A legend told of cursed cowboys driving demon cattle across the heavens, forever chasing, forever doomed. Whether true or not, these stories wrapped the cowboy world in an eerie, enchanting glow. The cowboy spirit today. Though the frontier faded, the cowboy never vanished. Modern ranchers in Texas, Wyoming, Montana, and beyond still ride, rope, mend fences, and battle storms. Tools changed, trucks, ATVs, GPS, but the heart of the work remains ancient. Why the cowboy endures? Because the cowboy is more than a job. He or she is a symbol of independence, of resilience, of courage against impossible odds, of a bond with land and sky, of work done not for glory, but because it must be done. Beneath the myth, beneath the dust and legends, stands a real person, sunburned, tired, gritty, but unwavering. And maybe that truth, raw and human, is greater than any Hollywood hero.